Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Gaming Tech.com video we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. It's fair to say that the next generation of consoles is getting tantalisingly close. We've been hearing an awful lot of rumours of both the Xbox Scarlett and PlayStation 5 in terms of specifications, release date, possible games that are going to be released on the platform, and so much more besides. And we all know that Nintendo have been ludicrously successful with their Switch systems, and of course there are also rumours that we're going to be seeing a Switch Pro, which is going to have beefed up performance compared to the vanilla system. But there is a contender that we all know is going to be rather interesting because it's not the traditional console philosophy. Instead, Google Stadia is going to be a streaming-only system. That's not to say that, say, Microsoft are not pursuing streaming as well. We've seen the xCloud gaming service. And this is where things get rather interesting, because Microsoft are not pulling any punches of their thoughts regarding the Stadia device. So let's go into this. In an interview with The Telegraph, the Chief Marketing Officer over at Xbox, by the name of Mike Nichols, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, said, and I quote, "Emerging competitors like Google have a cloud infrastructure, a community with YouTube, but they don't have the content obviously being the games. You won't necessarily need a device over time," he says in his thoughts regarding streaming, "but you'll get the best experience with local processing power." I tend to actually agree with Mike, at least in the next several years. I just don't think that we've got the internet infrastructure yet. And I have tried out Stadia. I actually tried it at GDC, and it wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I suspect certain games like Twitch first-person shooters, fighting games, they're just not going to be playable for some time on streaming. I just don't think it's going to be the optimum experience. Certainly if you're playing other titles like, say, Japanese RPGs, or even slower first-person titles like, let's say, Dishonored, that could certainly work, but I just personally wasn't super comfortable playing something like Doom 2016. I do believe that the technology is going to be getting better, and I don't think it's just in terms of like, oh, it's an improvement to the actual internet infrastructure, as in we see better, higher bandwidth, lower latencies, but I also think it's going to be as developers improve the API and the backbone of Google Stadia in terms of like how the actual application deals with latency, prediction. From my own perspective, I do like a local device. I just find it fun, and I don't know, doing things online, I think it's great for something like Netflix or Amazon Prime. I use them regularly, but for gaming, for now anyway, I don't think it's what I want to be using, and I do suspect that the industry is going to continue to embrace gaming streaming, but from Microsoft's comments here anyway, it doesn't look like they're going to be giving up an actual physical console at any time soon. And now we're going to move over to the PlayStation 5, which is codenamed, from reports anyway, Ariel. There has been an interesting entry that has been discovered on Pastebin. The Pastebin entry is from someone who is claiming to be a developer, and they are providing what they claim to be a list of specifications for the upcoming system, along with several games and some of Sony's plans. So we're going to go over this, and I'm going to give my thoughts and opinions of it. I'm a third-party small developer from EU, and for the last 8 months I've been helping a well-known company, that part's important, I'll get to why in a moment, in a AAA game development that is set to release in 2020 as a launch game for the PS5, obviously he means launch. Some infos that I'd like to share that are 99% correct. I say 99 because a small incremental hardware change can occur till 2020, although specs are set in stone. PS5 official info from Sony somewhere around next E3, although Sony will not be participating on E3, and I'd say that Q2 2019 will be a, quote, small reveal. PS5 release is going to be March or November in 2020. They've not finalised it yet. It's going to be backwards compatible, physical games and PS Store, PS Plus and PS Plus Premium. Premium only equals beta access, create private servers. The specs, the 7nm Ryzen 8 core, 16 threads, unknown speed. 7nm Navi architecture with 14 T-flops. It's going to be powerful and power efficient. Sony are working with AMD for Navi. Some sort of ray tracing, but will not focus on that. More focus with virtual reality and 4K. Much better overall bandwidth. 24GB of GDDR6 with 4GB of DDR4, which is going to be for the operating system. And we do have 32GB development kits. 2 terabytes, excuse me, that would be absolutely pathetic if it was 2 gigabytes of hard disk space, some sort of NAND flash, 8K upscaling, PS VR2 in 2020, reveal with PS5, big resolution boost, probably going to be at 1440p, 120Hz, 220 field of vision, eye tracking, wireless, battery life, 4 to 5 hours of wireless it seems. Headphones integrated, less motion sickness, no breaker box, much less cable management, much more focus on VR for AAA games. Price is going to be around $250. DualShock 5, some sort of camera inside for virtual reality, more analog precision for FPS games. Something similar to Steam analog trackpad. The price of the system is going to be $500, but there's going to be about $100 lost per system sold at the beginning. That doesn't really raise an eyebrow to me. A lot of system manufacturers do that at the start when it comes to consoles. The launch games are going to be for PS4 exclusives: Gran Turismo 7, which is going to be VR, PUBG, 4K, free to play on PS5, Last of Us 2 Remaster, Ghost of Us Tsushima Remaster, 2 to 3 AAA games plus PS VR games as well. Some non-exclusive games are going to include Harry Potter, GTA 6, Horizon 2, Assassin's Creed, and Battlefield Bad Company 3. Okay, so there certainly was a lot of claims there. Let's start things out with the most obvious of all of them, the specifications. I think it's almost certain Sony are going to be using AMD for the CPU and GPU. Not only have pretty much every single leak confirmed this, but we've also seen Sony not really have that many other options. Intel's graphics right now are not ready to the point where I think Sony are going to be using Intel's discrete GPU architecture. Nvidia don't have the CPU as well, and with the fact that Sony have been very happy with AMD in the past when it comes to the PlayStation 4 and the PS4 Pro, their continued relationship with AMD for the PlayStation 5 just makes sense. Plus, of course, as I said, we've seen multiple leaks, multiple reports that Sony are using AMD. There was an article on Forbes which basically said that the whole reason Navi exists, or at least one of the reasons it was created, was actually for the PlayStation 5. Supposedly, Sony helped fund the system. So the fact that we're seeing a Zen 2 CPU, the fact we're seeing an Navi-based GPU, those aren't surprising. In fact, a lot of these specs seem very close to a couple of other leaks that we've seen on the message boards, including the 24GB of GDDR6 memory, along with the 4GB of DDR4. Sony have in the past gone with a kind of split memory approach. We saw the PS4 Pro with some DDR3 memory in there, along with the GDDR5. So for them to take this approach and scale it up for the PlayStation 5, it wouldn't particularly be surprising. But that doesn't mean that it's confirmed by any stretch of the imagination. However, Amy did cover just yesterday that there seems to be an APU that looks suspiciously like the APU that you would see in the next generation systems. From multiple reports now, both Sony and Microsoft are using a very similar CPU/GPU configuration from AMD. For those who are inevitably going to ask in the comments, well, which one's more powerful and what's the difference? No one knows. It's possible Sony could have a GPU or CPU that's faster than Microsoft. It's possible it could be slower. It's possible it could be the same clock speed. It's possible that it might be a memory difference. It's possible there might be some underlying changes in our architecture. We don't know. Some people on message boards which have no real validity have said, well, Xbox's GPU has some Arcturus or next-gen GPUs, which is the successor after Navi, but that does not preclude Sony from having it, and it also is not a smoking gun that, well, Microsoft's console has it. With that said, I would not be surprised if there is some type of ray tracing on the next-generation systems, because ray tracing is just becoming so prevalent in the industry right now, and it can be rather interesting in terms of old games and making them look really cool. I did a Quake 2 look back just recently with a Quake 2 project with ray tracing, so I don't necessarily know if Sony are going to be using it for emulation or anything like that, but who the heck knows what they're planning. There's just so many different possibilities with the next generation systems. It's going to be really interesting. But what we also have, of course, are the various titles and claims that we're going to see remasters of games which essentially are going to be released on the PS4. That honestly is not also a big deal to me in terms of like raising an eyebrow. It's pretty obvious that we're going to see The Last of Us 2 also release on the PlayStation 5 as well as the PS4. Sony did the same thing with a lot of PS3 games, if you remember. We had, let's say, The Last of Us or Uncharted, and all of those titles came to the PlayStation 5 as well. The other thing we saw is backwards compatibility, once again. We've seen numerous patents from Sony themselves, more specifically filed by the lead architect of the PS4, as well as the Vita, if memory serves, Mark Cerny. And from Sony and Cerny own patents, it would appear that almost certain that the next generation PlayStation will have backwards compatibility. I would probably say the PS1, PS2, PS3 and PS4, I would be curious if the Vita is as well, are going to be backwards compatible with the PS5, because let's face it, the PS1 in terms of physical emulation is not particularly difficult anymore with any modern system. Despite the fact that more gamers than ever are embracing the digital future, there are still a lot of people who just cannot download, realistically anyway, 50, 60, 70, 80 gigabytes. It may be that they have a bandwidth cap in place, or their internet is just not up to the task. For example, they could be in a certain part of the United States, like a rural area of the US, or even parts of the UK. There are some people who just do not have access to fast internet. Certainly not fast enough to download, let's say, 100 gigabytes of game data. So, I guess where I'm going with this is anyone can make a paste bin document. And now I'm going to circle back to something I said when I first started to read out the paste bin document. You might recall that I said that that's important when referencing he did help on a AAA title. So why is that important? Well, from multiple reports from industry insiders, it's almost certain that only the biggest studios have access to the PlayStation 5 hardware. I did my own bit of digging while at GDC, and I spoke to numerous indie studios, and they've all said to me flat out that indie studios were not getting a look in with PS5 hardware. They said that only, and they repeated the same thing, that only the large AAA studios have it, and they think that maybe one of their friends, that's what one person told me, maybe one of their friends had tried out the PS5 kit, but even he wasn't certain whether that was the case or not. So I'm just saying that anyone can make a paste bin document, and I'm not saying that this stuff isn't true. I wouldn't be surprised in the least if, at the very least, the specs are quite true. The fact we've got backwards compatibility, because once again, we've seen so much evidence that that's the case for multiple leaks now. But it's possible all this person has done is pretty much compiled a list of these leaks and put it into one document. Then again, it's also possible that there's no smoke without fire, and therefore this individual is just basically confirming a whole bunch of other leaks with their leak. However, what is really interesting is we also have a new patent that's shown up, and it does indeed appear to be the next generation of PSVR. These were filed on April the 4th, and they were filed at the United States Patent and Trademark Offices, and it does indeed appear to be a legitimate Sony application. You could see that there are indeed numerous tweaks and changes to the design. Most of them are pretty obvious here, including the fact that it does indeed appear to be wireless. And indeed, the patent also says gauge tracking system of the glasses may be configured to transmit the signal. So once again, it does appear that we are looking at a wireless-based system that does have a lot of the features that were alluded to in that leak. And finally, have you got any of that there? Ray tracing. Nvidia have made the decision to extend ray tracing to Pascal class graphics cards, so that would be the GTX 1060 and above, and also the GTX 16 series of GPUs as well, which of course do use the Turing architecture, yes, but they are lacking the tensor and ray tracing cores. So Nvidia have released a series of benchmarks, and they are doing so with several demos as well. It's because they are lacking the ray tracing cores, it is down to the actual CUDA cores of the GPUs to do this. And one of the advantages that Turing has over Pascal is that they allow the concurrent execution of both integer and floating points, which means that you can do more work per clock, which essentially means that the Turing-based 16 series, technically speaking, has an advantage in pure architecture simply because of the CUDA core design, whereas Pascal lacks that functionality. And we can see that reflected, ray tracing joke, oh dear. We can see that reflected in the scores. For example, with DXR, which is obviously a slight advantage to Turing anyway, well, yeah, the 16 series does actually perform better than most of the Pascal GPUs, and even the 1660 is basically on par with the 1070. And clearly the 2080 and 2080 Ti are the fastest GPUs on offer. But we also have other results as well, including the Atomic Heart RTX demo, which is at 1440p on an i9-7900X. And once again, you can see a clear difference in performance with the RTX series of GPUs compared to that of Pascal. They say that, the 1080 Ti is getting demolished by basically every card in the Turing lineup with the RTX series, and even the 1660 Ti does a favourable job actually beating the 1080 and other cards. Anyway, I think that just about does it for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. As I close out, normal stuff. If you've enjoyed the video, well, like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel. And you can also find us linked down below on Patreon as well as Amazon affiliate links. So if you need to buy some razors or, a new lawnmower or something like that, then by all means use those Amazon affiliate links because it gives us a few pennies and it doesn't cost you anything. Don't feel you have to, but if you choose to, that would be very appreciated. Oh, and one last thing. I realize a number of you have actually been following my personal Twitter account, not just the RGT Twitter account. I haven't really posted anything on it in a long time, my personal account, so I've been kind of posting more on the official account, but I decided to, change that. So I'm going to start posting a little more on my own personal account as well. Do know that it's not just going to be tech stuff that I'm going to be posting on that. There's going to be some bodybuilding stuff, some life stuff, obviously tech, gaming, movies, comic books, and, basically anything that I find interesting. So you can follow that as well if you wish, as well as the official account should you so desire. You can also email me directly if you have any tips and or links that you would like to send me. You can do so at paul@redgamingtech.com. That's paul@redgamingtech.com. And obviously your identity will be anonymous. With all of that said, take care of yourselves. Bye for now.